This video is brought to you by Spigen. I recently switched to the iPhone 14 Pro from the iPhone 14. Now, the iPhone 14 is a good phone, but the iPhone 14 Pro is even better. I mean, of course it is. It costs $200 more. But I mean better value. You see, for the first time, Apple's Pro model iPhone offers more phone per dollar when compared to the non-Pro model. In this video, I'm going to share with you my experience switching between these two phones and why I ultimately think the iPhone 14 Pro is the better buy when compared to the regular iPhone 14. But first, I am doing a giveaway on this brand new iPhone 14 Pro, and if you want a chance to win, be sure to subscribe to my channel, like this video, and leave a comment with your Instagram username. And then follow me on Instagram, where I will announce the winner on March the 12th. So what exactly is the price difference? Well, the 14 Pro comes in at $999 for 128 gigabytes, where the regular iPhone 14, also for 128 gigabytes, comes in at $799, meaning there is a $200 price difference, which is not insignificant. In other words, the 14 Pro has to deliver a lot to make up for this difference in price. From a design perspective, both phones have this 6.1-inch form factor, which I think gives the best of both in terms of the portability, letting you still use it in one hand, but still giving a big enough display to comfortably enjoy your content. Now, while the sizes may be similar, the approaches to the design are very different, where the iPhone 14 Pro uses this nice matte glass back and stainless steel on the frame. You can see here, if I hold this close, watch it focus on my phone here. Recently got a new camera. I love how good the autofocus is. Don't want to get distracted though, but check out how good the 14 Pro looks. And this design is super premium, not just in the way it looks, but also in the way that it feels in the hand. Now, compared to that, the regular iPhone 14 uses a glossy glass back and aluminum frame. Now, these are decent materials, but also nothing special. Also, the glossy glass back on the 14 is an absolute fingerprint magnet. You can see here if I hold that close, watch how it just collects dust and fingerprints. And the aluminum frame on the side, though I do like that it is matte, it is of course not as durable or hard as a stainless steel frame on the 14 Pro. And then in the hand, I prefer the more dense feel of the 14 Pro. It just feels more solid. I mean, at the end of the day, these are both well-made phones, but there's just a certain luxurious quality that you only get with the Pro and don't get with the 14. Also, the Pro is more durable. Both phones have been dropped, unfortunately, and on my iPhone 14, I actually have some paint chips on the aluminum of the frame, where you can see these grayer marks, and this will show especially on the darker colors, such as the Midnight that I have. Whereas by comparison, the iPhone 14 Pro, which has been dropped more than once as well, shows no signs of damage on the phone. So when it comes to the displays, these phones are very different too. First of all, the iPhone 14 Pro introduced the new Dynamic Island, and this brings essentially a new way to interact with your phone, merging your hardware and software. And using the phone every day, I especially like being able to quickly switch between open apps, for example, a timer and my music app, as well as getting app info at a glance just through the widget without having to go into that application. For example, turn-by-turn directions whilst I'm walking down a busy street. Now, by comparison, the regular iPhone 14 just has the standard notch, which of course, like the 14 Pro, does still have Face ID, but then also doesn't add any of the special features that you get with the Dynamic Island. But the biggest difference between the displays is the refresh rate, where the super smooth 120Hz refresh rate on the 14 Pro just feels so much more smooth and fluid when compared to the 60Hz refresh rate that you get on the 14. Holding the two phones side by side, this difference is clear, where everything just feels more fluid on the 14 Pro. Once you get used to the super smooth nature of that 120Hz refresh rate, your eyes have a funny way of adjusting, so then when you go back to 60Hz, like on the regular 14, everything just feels choppier and even a bit slower, but more on performance in a sec. Now, to me, a high refresh rate display is more important on a phone than on any other device. And this is simply because of the nature of how you use your phone, right? You are constantly swiping, scrolling through social media, switching between apps, and because that high refresh rate display impacts any movement on screen, it has an impact on everything that you do, and I think makes a significant difference to the overall user experience. Now, I've said this before, but it's 2023, and I think it is high time for Apple to add a high refresh rate display to all of their iPhones, not just the Pros. The display on the 14 Pro is also brighter when compared to the 14, with a max brightness of up to 2000 nits compared to 800 nits on the regular 14, and this is twice as bright. Now, under normal conditions, say indoors, both screens are bright enough, but when you go outside, and especially in the sun, this high brightness is really nice to have, especially when you need to quickly check your phone, find that address in that email whilst you're out and about, or read the maps, the small street names. A brighter display really is great to have. And on top of that, the 14 Pro also has an always-on display, and since a recent iOS update, you can actually customize this to just show your notifications at a glance. Nice touch. So as you can hear, my experience switching from the 14 to the 14 Pro has been really positive. But before I talk more about comparing the cameras, performance, and longevity, because the 14 Pro is a more expensive phone, it is all the more important you keep it protected. And this is where this excellent line of cases from Spigen come in, each with its own special feature. Starting off, we have the Ultra Hybrid MagFit 01. The 01 features a unique design showing the inside of your iPhone, which looks really cool, all while still being MagSafe compatible and providing military-grade drop protection. I especially like that the elements of clarity are made to resist yellowing over time. Speaking of drop protection, this is where the Tough Armor case comes in, which uses a 4-layer design for even greater drop protection. And here, I really like the built-in stand letting you easily watch videos on the go. You know what's worse than a scratch on your screen? A scratch on your camera. And this is where the Optic Armor case comes in with a built-in camera cover to keep the impressive cameras on the 14 Pro nice and protected. And then finally, there is the Cryo Armor, which is perfect for gamers as it features the Arctic Flow technology, where the air cube pattern increases airflow and thus helps dissipate heat to keep your phone cool. To learn more about this functional line of cases from Spigen and to protect your phone, be sure to click the links in the description. Now, let's talk about the cameras. If you're like me and take a lot of photos and videos on your phone, the 14 Pro's camera system offers some really big advantages. Namely, you get a larger, new 48 megapixel sensor and also a third telephoto lens, giving it a triple lens camera system compared to the dual lens camera system you get on the regular 14. Now, don't get me wrong, photos from both of these phones are truly great. But when comparing the two side by side, you can see that in every shooting scenario that I tried, the 14 Pro does beat the iPhone 14. Have a look. In general, I found the 14 Pro to give even more accurate and true-to-life colors. You can see the difference here when comparing the colored signs. The 14 Pro also better sets the white balance. Check out how the shades of white differ on this building here. You can see that on the 14, we get this sort of green hue, and you'll see this throughout the examples. In fact, you can also see this here on the close-up of the sign, where we also get a nicer bokeh on the 14 Pro. And thanks to its larger sensor, the 14 Pro is also sharper, letting it retain more detail, especially seen here when we zoom in on the tiles. The improvement in sharpness is shown again here in this picture of a plant, just showing more detail, especially around the edges of the leaves. Thanks to its faster aperture, the 14 Pro also gets a more shallow depth of field, especially seen here if we look at the rear tire of this amazing Lego car that I built. Quite proud. I also found there to be better dynamic range on the 14 Pro. If we look here at the dark parts of the tripod, you see there's more detail, while at the same time keeping the bright white text even more sharp. And then flipping to the front camera, when it comes to these selfies, both look good, but skin tones are more lifelike on the 14 Pro, where again on the 14, we see this green tinge return. As expected, in low-light photography, the 14 Pro's larger sensor lets in more light and thus creates sharper images that are also brighter and again retains better color reproduction. All in all, the camera on the regular iPhone 14 is by no means bad, but what you can see from these photo examples is that the 14 Pro is better in every example, and to someone like me who uses their phone camera every day, this does add up and make a pretty big difference. Plus, the 14 Pro also adds a 3x telephoto lens, and this I find to be the perfect lens for portrait photography. And thanks to that larger 48 megapixel main sensor, it also adds a 2x telephoto lens, in which it sort of crops in. And this essentially gives you 3 lenses, but 4 focal lengths on the 14 Pro, double that you get on the regular 14. And more focal lengths enable more shooting opportunities, letting you get more creative with your shots and ultimately better photos. I also found that on the 14 Pro there is less shutter lag. Shutter lag is the delay between pressing the shutter button on the camera and it actually taking the photo, meaning you are less likely to miss that precious moment on the 14 Pro. And then the icing on the cake is that the 14 Pro can also capture RAW photos and ProRes video. And these formats essentially capture more data, allowing for more flexibility when it comes to editing your content in post to make it look even better. This is especially important if you use your phone camera professionally. In fact, I regularly use 4K 60 FPS footage shot on my iPhone 14 Pro in my YouTube videos. For me, longevity is really important. These phones are expensive and they have to last. But here too, these two are not the same. So this year, for the first time, Apple reserved its new A16 Bionic chip only for the iPhone 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max, where the regular iPhone 14 and 14 Plus get last year's A15 Bionic chip. Today, both the 14 Pro and the 14 run well and keep up. Though I have found that bigger apps such as video and photo editing apps and even some games do load faster on the 14 Pro. Now, where the difference between the A16 Bionic chip and the A15 Bionic chip is really going to show is in the years to come, where I do expect the newer and more powerful A16 Bionic chip to get anywhere from 1 to 2 more years of software support, updates, and new features. Now, Apple is known for providing a lot of software support and longevity to their devices, but the iPhone 14, since it does have that older processor, does give it a disadvantage. I would expect it to last anywhere from 4 to 5 years compared to the 5 to 7 years you're going to likely get on the 14 Pro. And this makes the 14 Pro a better long-term investment and actually more affordable if you divide the cost over the number of years that the phone can last. Just something to consider. When it came to the battery life, I found these two to perform quite similar with around 7 to 8 hours of screen on time, which is enough to get me through a full day. Though when I do come home at the end of a workday and then before heading out again, I do often need just a quick top up, and here the faster charging that you get on the 14 Pro, which is 27 watts compared to the 20 watts on the 14, does make a significant difference, allowing me to get more battery when you need just a quick top up of charge. So what are my final thoughts after switching from the regular iPhone 14 to the 14 Pro? Well, last year I called the regular iPhone 13 the best value iPhone out at the time, as at that time the relatively small difference in features between the 13 and the 13 Pro to me didn't warrant the increase in price. But this year things are different. This year for just $200, the 14 Pro adds a lot, including the more premium and durable design, as well as the dynamic island, which allows for some pretty neat interactive features. But more importantly is that super smooth 120 Hz refresh display, which, believe me, makes a difference in everything that you do. Not to mention the display is also brighter. And you get that newer A16 Bionic chip, which will get more years of software support and ultimately contributes to making the phone last longer. And finally, you get some pretty big camera upgrades, performing better in all scenarios and offering more lenses, creating for more shooting possibilities. It really is a perfect example where a lot of small upgrades altogether really create a big difference. And this is why, for me, after extensively using both phones, I can say that the 14 Pro for the first time actually offers a better value compared to the regular iPhone 14. More expensive, yes, but you just get more phone for your money, thus providing better value. Anyway, those are my thoughts on switching from the regular 14 to the 14 Pro. But what are your thoughts? I'd love to hear your ideas in the comment section down below, as well as what you think Apple should do with the upcoming iPhone 15 and 15 Pro. If you guys haven't seen them yet, I highly recommend watching my iPhone 14 Pro First 10 Things to Do video to get the most out of your phone. I'll be sure to leave that linked on screen right now. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.